وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا مع ليلى الحسيني في بث حي ومباشر وعبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning Michigan with Layla Al-Husseini. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues with your host, Layla Al-Husseini.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge.
Good morning, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. Today we are discussing an important topic: art, social change, and community engagement. Lately, the media has been presenting many images of violent extremism, aggression, violence, hatred that have been filling media channels every single day. What role can art possibly play in order to overcome some of the negative stereotypes, divisions, and fragmentation that result from these types of media images? And what role can art play in terms of boosting community engagement and fostering better social change? With me this morning to discuss this important topic are two guests, Ms. Alison Wise, Executive Director of Sandy Spring Museum in Silver Spring, Maryland, who has 15 years experience in art museums, and Ms. Layla Allawa, the community artist in residence in Sandy Spring Museum in Silver Spring and the founder of Coming of Faith website. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and being with us today on Radio Baladi on US Arab Radio. And Ms. Allison, I'd like to start with you and to tell me the story behind Sandy Spring Museum. What is the vision? What is the mission of this particular museum?
Sure. Well, like many small museums, it was started really to focus on the history of the dominant culture, which in this area is the Quaker religion. And for probably about 30 years, that was really the focus of the institution. And, of course, the community has changed dramatically over the past 30 years, and now it is really representative of the greater Washington, D.C. metro area, which is, of course, very culturally diverse. And we noticed that there are so many different religions represented in this area, but it doesn't seem that people are really mixing with one another, like they're sort of siloed in their houses of worship. And we felt like the museum could be serving as sort of a secular gathering place. And so we decided to invite different cultural artists in to help us explore commonalities and differences between cultures, so to use the arts as sort of a platform for letting people to engage with one another and learn more about one another.
Yeah, this is a very important point, and reading your own bio, you actually kind of introduced this new vision of not just having a museum as a place of art per se, in the absolute sense of just exhibitions and pictures and visuals, but also bringing about this cultural interactivity component, if you will, the community engagement. Why would that be particularly important right now, in your opinion?
There's a lot of different reasons for it. One is just that I think people expect to participate now, like with the way that everybody kind of interacts with one another through the internet. It gives everybody a chance to have a voice, whereas before voices were very authoritarian and they were really limited to people who had, say, some kind of scholarly background or they had a position that gave them some kind of power. And museums in general are changing to try to address this and really give more opportunities for people to have voice. In our case in particular, we're trying to give voice, say, to the non-dominant culture because again, the community has changed so much, but I don't see that the local community has that many opportunities to voice their opinions and things. And so I feel like the museum can be providing that platform.
And of course, being situated in Silver Spring in particular is a big advantage and very relevant to the mission that you are talking about, because there are more than 200 different ethnicities and ethnic racial groups in this particular area, which is very interesting, and I'm sure this adds to the diversity of your target audiences and your target groups. And Layla, if I just would also tie into this particular point, you are the founder of a website called Coming of Faith, which really tries to give a platform for Muslim American women to have their voices heard. And if you can talk a little bit about the founding of this particular website and how it ties into this vision of cultural diversity and giving voice to marginalized groups, that would be great.
Yeah, so thank you so much again for having myself and Allison on the show today. It's such an honor. So I started Coming of Faith now 3 years ago. At the time, I was just fresh out of college. I'm a Muslim American woman. I wear a headscarf. I'm visibly Muslim. And just during my time at college, I had a visible community of Muslim American women and women that shared my experiences that I could turn to in times of which I needed help or I just needed solidarity, especially since I graduated and shortly afterwards there was the Boston bombing, which we can all remember was very intense and traumatic for many people's time. So I started Coming of Faith really with the mission to give a platform and also to give community to Muslim American women who many times feel silenced, either by mainstream media, because a lot of times media is simply speaking about Muslim women and not to Muslim women or giving Muslim women the chance to speak for themselves. And then also within the Muslim community, there's an issue where everyone talks about what's good for Muslim women, but nobody actually listens to us. So I really started Coming of Faith with that in mind, to disrupt what was going on. And we really took it quite seriously, the fact that women come from such different experiences and backgrounds and are so ethnically and culturally diverse and are part of a larger framework that is so diverse that we didn't want to be a platform in which there was any sort of proselytization or any sort of faith explaining, and instead it was really just a space where you would share your experiences and that was it, and others could find solidarity or could find differences in your story. So it's really taken off from there because there really wasn't a platform like that for Muslim women beforehand, and I think it was the inspiration for. We're doing a collaboration now with Sandy Spring Museum, which is really exciting. It's called Inner Voices, and it's really a chance for the museum and the surrounding community to have conversations with and about what contemporary Muslim American women are now, who we are, and what we stand for, and really hear from it in our own voices.
This is a very important point. I think especially now with all the media images and stereotypes about, Muslims in general, Muslim women in particular, and maybe to overcome what is called the Save the Muslim Woman syndrome, meaning that Muslim women are so helpless and they need help. And as you said, people are talking about them, but they're not talking to them or listening to their own voices. So, Allison, if you can just, give us your insight here in terms of why Sandy Spring Museum was excited about the idea of hosting this in Our Voices series, featuring Muslim women and their voices, but being open to a wider community and allowing them the opportunity to listen to these voices, and why this is especially important to you and to Sandy Spring Museum, especially now.
Right. So, my personal interest is, my background is in anthropology, and I remember very specifically one of our professors who was Native American saying, let people speak for themselves. So it's something that I just feel very passionately about, and I feel like I've been given the opportunity to have this museum that's kind of like a community gathering place. It's very centrally located, and there's so many people living in this area that don't otherwise have an opportunity to learn about one another because they're segregated by language, they're segregated by culture, they're segregated by faith traditions. And I see this as like we can get people in here, give them a way that they can voice their own opinions and have other people come and interact with people that they ordinarily wouldn't have met because, maybe you pass somebody on the street or you pass their house of worship all the time and you're wondering, am I welcome in that place or could I go inside? And you don't feel comfortable doing it. And I'm really hoping that the museum is a place where people feel comfortable doing that so that we can begin to have these really interesting conversations where people are able to speak for themselves, about themselves.
Mm-hmm. This is very, very important. And having Layla also as, a community artist in residence, I think this is also interesting. If you can speak a little bit about what does it really mean to have a community artist in residence and what is the value and advantage of having this in the museum?
So a very traditional model for a history museum would be that you either have historians who interpret history or you have the curator interprets history. And we decided to really turn this model on its head, and we identify people within the community who are artists of some sort. And it can be you're a visual artist, you're a literary artist, you're a performing artist. In Layla's case, we saw her as a literary artist because she runs this very large blog. And we seek out these artists that we feel like can interpret local history in a way that is much more accessible than a historian would be able to do it. And they're able to do it from a completely different perspective because they are speaking about a subject that is very near and dear to their heart rather than speaking about somebody else. And so we have a number of different examples where we've worked with African-American artists. We're working with a group of young Latino students who are part of the undocumented refugee crisis of children leaving Central America right now, and we're giving voice to all of these different groups so that they can be telling their stories first person.
This is very important. And Layla, if you can talk a little bit more about the kind of work that you've been also doing besides coming of faith. I know this has been your main, really production and what you have been, working on lately as a very important step. But if you can also talk about other type of maybe artistic work, any type of other contributions that you have also made along the same line of giving voice to Muslim women, Muslim American women, and enabling them to tell their own stories. Anything else that you have contributed along this line would also be worth mentioning.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do on the side, I do a lot of things. So whenever someone starts asking me that question, my heart starts racing because I don't know what to answer with. But thank you for giving me the parameters.
Sure.
So writing and telling stories is a huge passion of mine, and that's why we started Coming to Faith to begin with. But outside of that, I also write for a number of different national publications. I write for publications like The Guardian, Salon, Huffington Post, and Policy Mike. And I really started writing for the exact reason that I started Coming to Faith, which was to give Muslim American women the chance, at least for one of them, to be heard. So I initially began writing when the Femin protests happened in 2013. So if you remember, that was when the women, the feminist group of mostly blonde, mostly white women in Eastern Europe began showing up at mosques and just having extremely offensive messages about God and about Islam on their chests and protesting in front of the mosque topless and stating that they would save Muslim women from the religion and from the men that abuse them. And so I was extremely frustrated by the fact that media was only covering the side of the protesters and not actually listening to Muslim women who really did not need saving. So I pitched my idea to Huffington Post. I said to Arianna Huffington, listen, I'm a Muslim woman and I wear a headscarf. I consider myself a feminist and I don't think they're saving me. She gave me the platform to speak and I ended up writing my first piece. It went viral. It went on the front page of the Huffington Post. And as a result of that, I, as a fresh college graduate, was given the chance to debate the founder of Femin on this internationally watched broadcast. Sorry, I'm in an airport. So it really just showed me just how powerful storytelling is, and And that is something that I continue to do on a monthly basis because I really believe that you have a responsibility. If you have a talent, if you have something that you can share with the rest of the world, you should do your best, especially as Muslim American women, to really put it out there on the broadest channels possible.
Absolutely. This is very, very important, as we said earlier, especially during these times. It is very important to have these different voices heard and loud and in different platforms to correct some of the negative stereotypes and to spread proper awareness and understanding. We will come back again to this interesting discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
It's never too early to get your child on the right track. From their first words to first grade, Dreamy Children's Center in Troy works closely with parents to provide an experience that goes beyond early education. The highly qualified and experienced staff use a variety of programs that can help nurture important personality traits like responsibility, independence, problem solving, motivation, and respect. They also have educational programs ranging from preschooling for infants, toddlers, transitional toddlers, and pre-K to Montessori-approved programs and bilingual curriculums for young children. They're open from 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., can provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner with snacks in between, and can also arrange for after-school pickup. Dreamy Children's Center in Troy is located at 37373 DeQuinder, just above 16 Mile Road, and can be found on Facebook at Dreamy Children's Center. Ask about the free preschool program. Call today, 248-680-9170, 248-680-9170. Life for Relief and Development is a nonprofit charity that has been providing humanitarian aid and development to people and communities regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background for over 22 years. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life rushes to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Life also has development projects that provide medical relief, water purification, educational programs, relief for orphans, and much more. Your help and support can greatly improve these efforts. All donations are tax deductible. For more information, please visit our website at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's lifeusa.org, 248-424-7493.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arab, WNDK 690 AM, and WZMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. We are discussing today the theme of art, social change, and community engagement. And with me this morning are two guests, Ms. Allison Weiss, Executive Director of Sandy Spring Museum in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Ms. Layla Allawa, Community Artist in Residence at the museum and founder of the website Coming of Faith. And Allison, if I just want to touch also with you on another equally important event that you are also holding at Sandy Spring Museum soon, the event Freedom of Speech and Its Limits on March 4th. Why is it particularly important to have an event organized at the museum at this time, discussing the theme of freedom of speech and some of its limitations, in your opinion?
There's so many different things to say about freedom of speech. It's something that the United States, I feel like, has been struggling with ever since 9/11, that what are people allowed to say and what are people not allowed to say, and it seems like the rules are changing constantly. There's also been so many issues about, how do you define hate speech and the legal issues surrounding that. And it makes you really question, where do the boundaries get crossed, or where are you supposed to be drawing the lines around, what is okay to say and what would be considered offensive to say, what we should be able to say about our own government and how that has changed over time. So I feel like it's such a timely issue. But we find it interesting to discuss things like this in a history museum, because what we find is a lot of times that people have been grappling with these same issues for decades and decades and decades, and they just come about from different crises that kind of inform the discussion, or different social trends that inform the discussion, and we want to hear what people think about what's going on right now. How do we address this issue right now?
Mm-hmm. And I think also some of the current international events, recently, like, for example, the Charlie Hebdo event and others that raise issues of where do you draw the line between freedom of speech and, blasphemy or bigotry, or, as you said, hate speech. This is becoming particularly important. Layla, if you want to also add to this discussion your views on this issue and whether this is something you have touched upon maybe in some of your own writings. I saw that you are a contributor to more than one, media platform, including Huffington Post and others. If this is something that you would like to also comment on, and why it's important to maybe have these types of discussions, particularly now.
Yeah, so I am a huge fan of having uncomfortable conversations. I think I brought this up at a recent workshop that I did at Sandy Spring, in which we discussed taboos. That really you need to have uncomfortable conversations if you want to get anywhere at all. And and I know a lot of times my simply writing about an issue, whether it's controversial or not, is in itself controversial, especially for mainstream media outlets, because of the very basis of my identity. So it is in itself interesting. I particularly do not comment on international issues, specifically because I have decided there are a lot of amazing, women writers and male writers as well that do write on international issues. I specifically focus on domestic issues, but one of the topics that I have written about before is about surveillance, and about how, really it's not really that big of a deal for Muslims when we found out that there was surveillance going on. But it was an issue for the rest of America, and in writing about those experiences, it stirred up in a conversation in itself, because people had not really recognized just how prevalent that sort of issue was. So yes, to your question.
So also, I'm very interested in the event that you mentioned, which actually had a very interesting name. It was called History Happy Hour, on the subject of taboos, that was held at the Sandy Spring Museum on February 13th, just very recently, last week. And I really want to understand more about the rationale behind holding this particular event. What was the logic behind holding it, and what were some of the other topics, or maybe I should say taboos, that were discussed in this particular event? Layla, and then we will have Alison also join the discussion. What was the point behind it, Layla?
Yeah, so the point was really just to jump right in there and get people talking about something that they might not be specifically comfortable or familiar with, particularly because Muslim women are a lot of times considered a taboo topic, or they're just discussed very politically incorrectly. So the different taboo topics that I brought up included racism, and included racial segregation, as well as, Islamophobia, and the state of LGBTQ issues in the U.S. So it was a pretty interesting discussion. We had a lot of heated conversations that took place as a result of having some discussion questions, and I know that Alison took part in those conversations, so I'm sure that she can shed more light on the issue, since I was moderating the discussions. I didn't really take part in them as much.
Absolutely. Alison, if you can give us some insight onto this particular event, I really find it very interesting. First of all, why did you call it History Happy Hour on the subject of taboos? I find the name to be particularly intriguing, very interesting. What was the logic behind choosing this particular name? And if you can comment on the success of this particular event from your point of view and what it was able to achieve.
Sure. Well, History Happy Hour is a program that we run on a monthly basis that we've been doing for probably about a year and a half. So we pick topics that have some kind of historic tie, but we're looking at them in a contemporary way. So certainly the subject of taboos probably goes back to the beginning of human beings being on the planet. And what we saw from this discussion, and it's a bunch of people in a room that sit around in small tables and sort of debate the issue, is that it's so ingrained in us that there are subjects that you cannot discuss with other people that sometimes it's even hard recognizing what these things are. In particular, when you're sitting with a group of people, say, they're all the same color as I am, they probably have a similar, socioeconomic background, so we're just not even aware of all of these things that we are afraid of talking about with one another. And that's actually what struck me more than anything else.
The fear of breaking the taboo, if you will, just like discussing race or discussing politics or certain issues in the classroom, even at the university setting, can become challenging at times. What were the kind of audiences that this kind of event attracted, Alison?
This particular event, I would say, it tended to attract a slightly older. Pretty much everybody was Caucasian. I'm guessing that most of them were, I don't know, probably above 50, 60 years old. I think all of them spoke English as a first language. They were all born in this country. So they themselves did not represent the diversity of the community. And, you're self-selecting. When you come to a program like that, you probably have more of an open mind, say, maybe than the average person, because you're coming because you think it's interesting to discuss taboos. So I think they're coming from a different perspective at that point. They're coming because they believe that we should be able to have more honest conversations with people. But again, I feel like we're so accustomed to not saying what we're thinking a lot of the times that you're just not even aware of it.
This is interesting, but speaking about the diversity of the audience, I think one of the missions of Sandy Spring Museum, under your leadership as executive director, is also to attract more diverse audiences and participants in your events. What would be some of the strategies that could be used in order to ensure greater community outreach, engagement, and diversity, both in terms of the participants in your events as well as the audiences?
Right. So we tend not to have programs and just market them and hope that people show up. We tend to really go out into the community and identify people who we would say are like opinion shapers. Like maybe you have a group of people that you can bring and somebody else has a group of people they can bring. So we really try to cultivate relationships with people like that so that we can ensure that we're getting some kind of different representation in the museum. But also it's really important that when we have speakers here or when we have community artists in residence, that we work with them to help identify who they think can be an audience for the program. And they really participate very heavily in the marketing of these kinds of programs so that we're sure that we're building relationships with new groups of people.
Excellent. And in relation to this particular point, Laila, can you comment on your own role as a community artist in residence at Sandy Spring Museum in terms of trying to ensure this kind of diversity, attracting people to take part in some of the events you are helping to organize, or even ensuring the diversity of the audiences who can show up to these kinds of events?
Yeah, so one of the other things that I do in my life, besides writing and coming of faith, is I do marketing, I do advertising. So that is literally what I do for a living, and I do believe that it is extremely important to have a diverse audience. Particularly that week that we had the event, it was the same week that the Chapel Hill shootings happened, and many people, myself included, barely made it through the week because of just how traumatizing what happened actually was. So I think it's definitely important to bring in diversity. It's also important to understand certain communities, if they're going through certain moments, might not be able to fulfill their previous commitments to attending an event. But I think it really depends on how aggressive the outreach is, as well as like Alison said, reaching out to key opinion makers and really having them commit to coming in and following through on that.
Of course, and when you yourself come from a certain community or from a certain background, I'm sure this also helps you in terms of reaching out and ensuring some kind of diversity and better representation. Would you like to say also something about this? You yourself being an American, a Muslim woman, maybe can help you to have connections within this particular group, but also maybe in other groups that you also have contact with, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Absolutely. So this is, I think, an important asset to have different, artists and participants in such kinds of events who actually have diverse backgrounds themselves and therefore can help in terms of community outreach, engagement, and also ensuring diversity. We will come back again to revisit this interesting topic right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Jumana Kayrus. You've seen her images on giant billboards across the metro. Jumana Kayrus. You've seen her images on buses across the city. Now get to know Jumana Kayrus.
Most people who sit in my office across from my desk are hurting on so many levels. One thing people do not know about medical malpractice is that the statute of limitation, meaning the time that you have to bring suit against a doctor, a hospital, is 2 years. In medical malpractice, that's a very, very short period of time. Not every lawyer is an advocate, but every lawyer should be an advocate.
Let Jumana Kayrus protect your rights. Call the law offices of Jumana Kayrus at 1-866-YOUR-RIGHTS, extension 100, or visit yourrights.com.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Dana, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arab, WNDK 690 AM and WZMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, Associate Professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Maryland and an expert on Arab and Muslim media. And with me this morning are Ms. Alison Weiss, Executive Director of Sandy Spring Museum in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Ms. Layla Allawa, the Community Artist in Residence in Sandy Spring Museum, and also the founder of Coming of Faith website. Alison, if I go back to you and ask you, what made you personally interested in engaging in this type of work? You have been working in the museum business, museum arts, since almost 15 years ago. What got you interested, so to speak, in really engaging yourself in this type of work in the first place?
Well, like I said, my background is in anthropology. That's my graduate degree. And so I did a lot of research. I did research overseas. I was in the Peace Corps in Sierra Leone, and I did graduate research in Micronesia. And what really struck me is just how misinformed we are about what's going on in other people's cultures. That if you're not hearing directly from people, then you're hearing everything it's been, kind of mediated by a third party. And the stories that people have to tell themselves are usually very different from what we are hearing in the mainstream media. And so I'm very interested in the idea of oral history and first-person narratives, and I've really taken advantage of that, being the director of a museum, the third museum that I've directed, that I've been able to really incorporate that idea of hearing directly from people rather than reinterpreting their words for them.
That's a very important point of every type of authentic work in the area of anthropology or ethnography or any of these fields where, we say it's always about giving voice to the voiceless. So I think that's a very important point. And Layla, the theme of giving voice to the voiceless has also been dominant in your own work. Whether it is, Coming of Faith website or whether it is some of your own writings, some of the projects that you have been working on as well. What also got you personally interested in this particular type of work?
So, to be selfish, the reason I got interested in this type of work was really because I never wanted to have someone else go through the same experiences that I did growing up. So growing up, I was 10 years old when 9/11 happened. I am the oldest of 8 kids, and at the time there were 6 of us. And my father was traveling back and forth from New York City to New York, where we were living at the time, to where he was working. So it was just myself, my mother, and my 5 siblings. And so when 9/11 happened, my mom really had to deal with the fact that now she's this woman who's wearing a headscarf, who's living in upstate New York, and has a huge family, and now we're suddenly terrified of what's going to happen next. And I remember my mom telling myself and my siblings that you're now the ambassadors of Islam. Everything you do is being watched by everyone around you. Make sure that you're always representing the best image of Islam, and that stuck with me to a fault at times. And it really, as a 10-year-old, it really changes the way you look at how you act and how others act around you. And in recent years, as hate crimes against Muslim Americans have increased, especially there was a recent study that came out that showed that there are more hate crimes against Muslims now than there were before 9/11. I was really determined to make sure that no child ever has to feel as though they are the sole representation of Islam, and that instead there's support networks and places in which solidarity can be had. Because for me, growing up, there wasn't any of that. We didn't really have a mosque, and people lived far away from us in terms of the Muslim community. So especially in the world now where social media is king, pretty much, I want to really take full advantage of that in everything that I do. That's what I use social media to basically create community online.
This is very important, Layla, the point about digital media or online media. I think this is the dominant type of communication tool that is used now by young people, by new generations. They are online almost 24/7, almost. And they rely on social media and digital media for all their educational, cultural, social needs, you name it. Why would it be particularly important at this particular moment in time to have certain digital media platforms out there? Audio visuals, videos, online, as we always say, in journalism and communication, one picture speaks more than 1,000 words. Why is it particularly important to tap into these types of resources, in your opinion, in these particular areas and fields now?
Well, like you said, everyone spends their time online these days, especially Muslim teenagers, and I think it's extremely important to really make sure they don't feel a sense of aloneness, especially with everything that's going on abroad. A lot of times the way that recruitment for radical groups happens is because someone is lonely and they find themselves having friends that they've met online, only online, that are suddenly spouting more extremist views. That's how there were a few girls that were caught. There were a few girls, I think, in Michigan or somewhere in the Midwest. They were trying to join ISIS for the very reason that they were lonely. They were using digital media, and the only people that they found talking to them as Muslim women were operatives of ISIS. So.
Yeah, this is a very important point. I think they call it the lone wolf, syndrome. People who are lonely and therefore they try to find company or, unity with others through online. So I think using online and digital media resources in a much more active and productive way to engage people in a useful and positive cause is particularly important now more than ever. And Alison, your museum really engages in different types of activities on many different levels. And one of the areas I'm particularly interested in as well is, nurturing, community artists who are coming from indigenous backgrounds, have authentic types of art representing different countries and cultures. And I know that you will host the exhibition by artist Munir El-Tubgi at Sandy Spring Museum from March 7th until April 25th. And it's going to be under the title Visions of Egypt. Would you like to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So again, as you said, we're really trying to change what we're doing at the museum and make it much more representative of different cultural backgrounds. And so in the fall, we had the artwork exhibited by an artist named Ahmed Belal, and he is a very traditional Muslim artist. He only does scripture, actually, but he introduced us to Munir, who is a very abstract artist. And I found it very interesting that two very devout people could have completely different art forms. And so to me, that would be something that's really worth exploring as a museum, to show people that there are so many different types of art forms coming out, and that nobody is monolithic, and no one individual is representative of the views of, hundreds of thousands of or millions of people. So there's Muslim artists that are doing all sorts of different kinds of work.
I think this is particularly interesting since both artists you mentioned, Ahmed Bilal and Munir al-Tobgi, are both Egyptians. They're both, Egyptian American. They're both Muslims. They're both men, obviously, so they have some commonalities here, but they also have differences in terms of their approach to art. One of them being more focused on Islamic calligraphy, if you will, and the other one being more abstract. Visions of Egypt in particular, what is this exhibition going to be all about, and what is it going to be communicating to the audience?
Right. Well, the artist calls himself the Egyptian Picasso, so they're very, very, very abstract works, and every picture is speaks a very like a volume about the artist's work. So it's very spiritual, it's very personal, but he sees it also as kind of exploring the confluence of American and Arab culture. So he's kind of taking, his background from being an Egyptian and his experience of living in America for the past several decades and exploring those that cultural transition through artwork, which I think people are going to find very interesting when they understand the stories behind the individual pictures.
Absolutely. The story is very important, and maybe just as a suggestion on my part, I don't know if it is possible to have like a short synopsis or explanation of some of the exhibited arts, like maybe on the side, just a few lines, where the artist can just say, this is what this picture is all about, or this is the context, or this is the story behind it. Do you think this is possible to have something like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I always find it frustrating when I go into an art museum and it doesn't explain what the artist was thinking. So this is a very big part of the exhibit, that we will know what the artist was thinking when he was doing these paintings.
Absolutely. And what kind of audiences do you think this type of exhibition can possibly attract?
I think that it's going to attract, I'm hoping that it attracts, kind of the diversity of the community, which is people literally from all around the world. So I think that there's people who will be able to come who are curious and maybe have driven past, say, mosques dozens of times and the Muslim Community Center dozens of times, and haven't had the opportunity to really see what people are experiencing, what their personal experiences are of being Muslim Americans. So I'm hoping that it's people who want to see firsthand, to meet the artist and to get an idea of what his life is like by looking at his work.
And I think going back again to the theme of community engagement and diversity that we talked about at the very beginning of this program, especially in an area like Silver Spring, Maryland, that has, so many different nationalities and ethnicities and racial groups and religious groups, the theme of know your neighbor, I think, is a very important theme. And not just the Muslim American community, but also the Hispanic community, the African American community. Do you plan to have other types of events or activities also pertaining to other different racial, ethnic, cultural groups in the area as well?
Oh, sure. So we have been already, but an exhibit that's opening up that same weekend is actually the work of about 25 students who are part of an English as a second language program over at the neighboring high school, and almost all of them are very recent immigrants to the United States. They came over here from Central America and are part of the undocumented youth migration that's been going on, which has hit Montgomery County in a very hard way. And so we had an artist who was working with them, teaching them how to make books in which they were writing their personal stories of migrating to the United States. And some of the stories are absolutely heartbreaking. You would never know that a young person is experiencing this kind of trauma and this kind of life that only really someone much more mature should be experienced in a lifetime. And so to be able to give voice to these stories so that people can come in and meet the kids and see what these experiences are, I think it will change their perception of these newest residents in our county.
Absolutely. And as you said, with the new waves of social change and also, immigration, whether documented or undocumented, and having young people come from different parts of the world, different walks of life, and enrich this kind of community and add to its diversity is very important to capture in different venues, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about culture, or in the case of Sandy Spring Museum, in the venue of arts. These are very important topics and very important points that we would like to discuss further with our guests this morning, right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Are you going to start up a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Najee Abood at 248-442-9292. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Najee Abood now, 248-442-9292. New Concept Products and Designs, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. For more information, visit newconceptproducts.com. 248-442-9292. It's never too early to get your child on the right track. From their first words to first grade, Dreamy Children's Center in Troy works closely with parents to provide an experience that goes beyond early education. The highly qualified and experienced staff use a variety of programs that can help nurture important personality traits like responsibility, independence, problem solving, motivation, and respect. They also have educational programs ranging from preschooling for infants, toddlers, transitional toddlers, and pre-K to Montessori-approved programs and bilingual curriculums for young children. They're open from 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., can provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner with snacks in between, and can also arrange for after-school pickup. Dreamy Children's Center in Troy is located at 37373 DeQuinder, just above 16 Mile Road, and can be found on Facebook at Dreamy Children's Center. Ask about the free preschool program. Call today, 248-680-9170, 248-680-9170.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arab, WNDK 690 AM and WZMZ 700 AM.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. We are discussing today the theme of art, social change, and community engagement. And with me this morning are Ms. Alison Weiss, Executive Director of Sandy Spring Museum in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Ms. Layla Allawa, Community Artist in Residence at the museum and founder of Coming of Faith website. And Alison, I want you to talk a little bit more about the very interesting In Our Voices series that's going to take part in the Sandy Spring Museum soon. And I want to know who would be the pool of participants who will take part in this very interesting series.
Sure. Well, the series, of course, was conceived by Layla in conjunction with one of our staff members who does community outreach. And so she's come up with a whole bunch of different, topics for discussion, workshops that she's going to be leading that talk about all these different issues that we've been saying this morning on the radio show about giving people voice, about exploring people's personal identity, about learning from one another. And we're also going to be doing a fashion show because I think that there's a lot of misconceptions even around what people wear because that's, the most visible part of what we see about other people's culture, and we don't always understand why they have made those specific choices. But because we've involved some local Muslim communities, we've gotten feedback from them, and they have expressed some interest in having some particular events to be women only because they said that there's a big difference between how women, say, would dress at a women's only event rather than an event that's open to men also. And so we're really trying to understand what the different needs are of Muslims within the local community as well. So we like to have them give input into the programming that we're developing also.
This is very interesting. I find it to be very intriguing, not just having panelists or speakers, but also a fashion show, other forms of expression, artistic, maybe design and all of that stuff. Layla, would you like to speak a little bit about this, since it was your idea, really, to have this series in Our Voices in the first place? Would you like to focus on maybe the diversity in this particular form of representation of Muslim women and what that means, especially now?
Yeah, so, I was initially approached by Heidi, who works with Allison at the museum, to do the series, and at the time, Coming of Faith was a little bit less developed, and we weren't very sure of our direction, but we knew that in terms of the programming and in terms of the exhibitions, that there was a lot that could be discussed, simply because there really hasn't been a chance for Muslim women to collaborate in such a way and actually have a space for programming, a space for exhibits that speak from their own experiences, as opposed to speaking from this exotified version of what Muslim women are supposed to be, or just this whole notion of untailing Muslim women, which generally can lead to some very stereotypical assumptions. So really with the programming, our work there is really to make sure that we really explore as many facets of really the different struggles that women and people go through generally, but through a special lens of Muslim women. So we're going to be looking at things like, again, having a little bit more of an in-depth conversation. Our launching panel will be about having different Muslim women authorities in the area speaking about taboos and stereotypes that they've had to deal with, but also dealing with how to write, how to give yourself a voice to speak, talking about what your personal sense of community is. And like Allison said, the fashion show is really a chance. It's been exciting for us because while we do have a fashion component of the site, we haven't done any sort of fashion show before. So we're really excited to be able to kind of give women the chance to express their identities through their clothing, which to most women today, that is a huge part of their identity, whether or not that's a conscious decision. And in terms of the exhibits, we're having 2 exhibits. One of them will be looking at photographs of Muslim women, so really giving people a chance to see the true diversity that there is within just one subset of the vast American community, as well as an exhibit around the variety and diversity of clothing among Muslim women in the American community. So again, two different facets of what it means to be a Muslim woman, but we're really looking to take it far beyond just talking about hijab or talking about things that usually are the topics of conversation when you give Muslim women a chance to speak.
I think this is very interesting. The combination of words and pictures and images and fashion, I think, would provide the audience with a very diverse picture of who Muslim women really are, and that they do not really come in any kind of monolithic or stereotypical way as the media sometimes misrepresents them. But I also came across something very interesting I'd like to share with you, which is this image of Qahira, the cartoon character that was created by an American Muslim woman. She's a cartoonist, she's an artist, and she created this character called Qahira, which means in Arabic the conqueror, the one who conquers. And of course, it's also the name of Cairo, the city of Cairo in Arabic. But this particular representation of a strong, veiled Muslim woman being a conqueror and being able to break taboos and barriers and all of that stuff, what does that communicate, this form of art or representation, Layla?
I mean, it really communicates that this cartoonist really believes in who Muslim women are and the potential that they have. And we ourselves have a cartoonist on our site, although she does not focus specifically on one character. But once you give people the chance to create visual art around their narratives and around their stories, the results that come about after a few missteps, of course, at the beginning, is really groundbreaking, especially for minorities that usually don't have their voices heard or have their voices spoken for. So I remember when I first found out about Qahira, it was extremely exciting, and I was able to actually interview the artist behind her. But it was extremely exciting because, you don't see this sort of picture of Muslim women. You don't see this badass woman just doing whatever she wants and really standing up for the rights of those that are oppressed. at least not in mainstream media very often.
Absolutely. And in the few remaining moments of our program, I would like to ask each of you, starting with Alison, what is your future vision for Sandy Spring Museum, and what are some of the goals and objectives and dreams that you still need to fulfill or achieve in the future?
Right. So, one of the questions that you asked of Layla was about social media, and obviously she's of a generation that she's very focused on social media, and that's given her an absolutely amazing platform for sharing stories. We're actually sort of the opposite. We're really hoping that people use the museum as a place to have face-to-face engagement in a world where it seems like that's becoming less and less of an opportunity for people. So we want people to come in here and really meet people face to face and have important discussions with them. And I also think that makes people, it makes people less likely to say really off the wall, incredibly rude, offensive things like they sometimes do online, which is part of why we don't have an online platform. But just personally, again, my experience living overseas, and particularly in the Peace Corps, I went overseas thinking that I was going to discover that deep down inside everybody's exactly the same. And what I found out was actually people are extremely different from one another, and that's a wonderful thing. And that's what I want people to learn at the museum. Not that they're coming here to say, I'm going to learn everyone's just like me. What I want them to learn is everyone is different from you, but that's a wonderful thing.
But I also see that you are also welcoming the idea of having different types of artists, some of whom are very digitally based, such as Layla, for example. You still open a window and a platform for them to come over and to talk about their digital and online activities and give them space for this as well. So it seems that you're doing some kind of really good job in terms of balancing these different means of communication.
Absolutely. We must keep up with the times, right?
Absolutely. That's where the future is, and that's where all the young people are. But I do acknowledge your point about the need for more face-to-face communication, and especially that people sometimes, unfortunately, behind the curtain of anonymity, would say some of the most hateful, offensive, abrasive stuff that they would never dare to say to other people face-to-face behind the curtain of anonymity on social media. So I really kind of applaud your efforts to focus more on interpersonal communication and face-to-face engagement, while also acknowledging the importance of digital media and online communication. And Layla, in just a couple of minutes, if you can quickly also tell us your own vision for the future. You are very young, obviously, but you are also very talented and very capable. What are some of the visions and dreams that you would like to accomplish in the future?
My biggest dream is to make sure that in 5 years from now, in mainstream media, it will be difficult for anyone to say that they don't hear from Muslim women, because our voices will be so predominant and strong in the narratives that we speak out about. Other dreams, I think it's extremely important to just continue working on building coalitions and stepping outside of comfort zones, especially as an ethnic minority and as a religious minority. I think it's very easy to pull yourself back up once a tragedy or a specific circumstance takes place. And I really believe that the only way that we can really make it out and make it out with the most positive results possible is to form long-lasting coalitions within American communities and to really give back to the cultural framework of America, as well as still creating our own culture, but just recognizing that we have a space here too, and we need to start filling it more than we already are.
Absolutely, and I applaud your effort as well. I'm afraid we are running out of time today, so we have to wrap up this very interesting discussion. I want to thank you both so much, Ms. Alison Wise and Ms. Layla Allawa, for joining us this morning on Radio Baladi on US Arab Radio, and also for all the great work that you have been doing to really create this kind of interesting bridge between art, social change, and community engagement. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, and I hope to have you again on Radio Baladi on US Arab Radio. At the end of the show this morning, I would also like to thank all the listeners who have been with us today and all the US Arab Radio support team. Thank you all so much. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.